Every night you disappear, not metaphorically, not poetically. You actually cease to exist in any way you would recognize as yourself. No thoughts, no sensations, no awareness of time passing, just nothing. And then, without warning, without memory of the gap, you're back. The same person, the same identity, as if you never left. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night. Where do we go? Is not into dreams. Dreams are easy to explain. They're vivid, they're strange, they leave impressions. But between dreams, or sometimes for hours at a stretch, there's another state entirely. Deep, dreamless sleep. A place so empty that you can't even remember being there. Science calls it NREM stage 3. Most people call it rest. But what if it's something far stranger than that? Because here's where it gets uncomfortable. Neuroscience suggests that during this phase, the brain's integration collapses. The networks that generate your sense of self go offline. Consciousness as we know it might actually stop. And yet spiritual traditions from around the world, some thousands of years old, insist that awareness doesn't vanish, that something remains, something formless, contentless, but undeniably present. So which is it? Do we die a little every night and get rebooted each morning? Or is there a silent witness, a hidden layer of consciousness we brush against but never remember? This video doesn't offer answers. I'm not here to tell you what to believe, but I do want to walk with you through this mystery, one that every single person experiences but almost no one talks about. Because dreamless sleep isn't just about rest, it's about identity. It's about continuity. It's about what we are when everything we think of as me dissolves into nothing. If you're someone who's drawn to these kinds of questions, the ones most people are too afraid or too busy to sit with, I'd love to have you here. Please subscribe. So let's start simply. Tonight, when you fall asleep, you'll vanish. And tomorrow morning, something will return. The question is, if you are gone, what exactly came back? Let's talk about what actually happens when you fall into deep sleep. Your brain moves through stages, light sleep first, then deeper still, until it reaches what scientists call slow wave sleep. This is the dreamless zone, the place where the mind goes quiet in a way that's different from anything else you experience while alive. During this phase, your brain waves slow down dramatically. The electrical patterns that usually fire in complex coordinated bursts across different regions begin to flatten out. Delta waves take over, slow, rolling oscillations that sweep across the cortex like a tide pulling everything under. And here's what neuroscience has discovered. The integration that creates consciousness starts to break down. Normally, your brain operates as a unified system. Different areas communicate constantly, sharing information, creating the seamless sense that you are one coherent person experiencing one coherent world. But in deep sleep, that communication falters. The networks fragment. The regions that would normally talk to each other stop responding. The whole system loses its ability to generate the rich, interconnected states that we associate with being aware. What does that mean for you, for the sense of I that feels so solid, so continuous? It means that from the brain's perspective, you might actually go offline. The self-model, that internal representation your mind maintains of who and where you are, collapses. There's no you to experience anything, no observer, no center, just isolated pockets of neural activity that can't organize into anything resembling consciousness. When people are woken up from deep sleep and asked what they were experiencing, most of them report nothing, or fragments so brief and incoherent they barely qualify as thoughts. It's not like forgetting a dream, it's more like there was nothing there to forget in the first place. And this happens every single night, for hours. You spend a significant portion of your life in a state that, by all observable measures, resembles a kind of temporary non-existence. Think about that for a moment. Every night, the thing you call yourself, the continuous thread of identity you've carried since childhood, dissolves completely. And yet tomorrow morning, you'll wake up and feel like the same person. You'll remember yesterday, you'll pick up where you left off, as if the gap never happened. So here's the unsettling question. If consciousness actually stops, if you genuinely cease to exist for those hours, then how does the same you return? What preserves the continuity? What makes sure the person who wakes up is the same one who fell asleep? And more importantly, What if other traditions have been saying something completely different about this state all along? Not everyone agrees that dreamless sleep is unconscious. There's a growing body of research, quieter, less certain, but deeply curious, that suggests something else might be happening, that the absence of content doesn't necessarily mean the absence of awareness. Philosophers call it minimal phenomenal experience. The idea is simple but strange. Consciousness at its most basic level. No thoughts, no images, no sense of self or time or location. Just being. A kind of blank presence. Awareness without anything to be aware of. It sounds impossible, right? How can you be conscious of nothing? But if you've ever had a moment in waking life where your mind goes completely still, not asleep, not distracted, just quiet, you might have touched something close to it. A sense of presence that doesn't depend on what you're looking at or thinking about. It's there before the thoughts arrive. Now imagine that same presence, but without the ability to remember it, without the cognitive machinery to encode it as an experience. That might be what's happening in deep sleep. Researchers have started interviewing people about these states, and some of them, not many, but enough to be interesting, report something they struggle to describe. They talk about a kind of nothingness that wasn't quite empty, a vastness, a stillness, an awareness that they were aware, even though there was nothing specific to point to. They can't say what they experienced because there was no what, but they also can't say it was nothing because something felt present. And then there are the meditators, practitioners of certain traditions, Tibetan dream yoga, transcendental meditation, some branches of Advaita Vedanta, claim they've trained themselves to remain aware through the entire sleep cycle, including deep, dreamless sleep. They describe it not as blankness, but as clarity, a kind of luminous awareness that recognizes itself. Consciousness without objects, being without becoming. Science hasn't confirmed this. The studies are small, the claims are hard to verify. But the consistency across cultures and traditions is striking. It suggests that maybe the void isn't as empty as it seems from the outside. So what would that mean? If awareness can exist without content, without memory, without identity, without anything to hold on to, then what is the self? What are we when we're not anyone? Because if consciousness doesn't require a thinker, doesn't require thoughts, doesn't even require the sense of I am here, then the thing we spend our whole lives defending and defining and worrying about might be far less fundamental than we thought. And here's the strange part. Ancient traditions mapped this territory thousands of years ago. They had names for these states. They had practices designed to explore them. And what they found wasn't emptiness. They found something they considered the ground of everything. The Upanishads, ancient Sanskrit texts written over 2,000 years ago, describe consciousness as moving through three primary states: waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. But they also describe a fourth state, something that doesn't fit neatly into the cycle, something that underlies all three. They called it turiya, the witness, the background. In the waking state, you're aware of the external world. Objects, sounds, sensations. In the dreaming state, you're aware of an internal world. Images, stories, emotions generated by the mind itself. But in deep sleep, what they called sushupti, there are no objects at all, no internal, just undifferentiated consciousness, formless, silent, blissful, they said, though not in a way you could remember or describe. Here's where it gets interesting. These traditions didn't consider deep sleep to be unconscious. They considered it a state where the mind withdraws completely, where all distinctions collapse, and what remains is pure awareness without division. Not awareness of something, just awareness resting in itself. They described it as peaceful, as a kind of return to source, the closest most people come to their essential nature without realizing it. But there was a problem. Something obscures it, some veil, which is why you don't remember. Why you come back in the morning with the same patterns, the same identity, the same sense of separation. But if you could stay awake through it, if you could meet that state consciously, they believed you'd recognize what you've always been underneath the noise. Not a person, not a self, just this silent, continuous ground that never actually goes anywhere. And turiya, that fourth state, it's not another state you enter. It's the awareness that's already present in all three. The constant background, the thing that's awake when you're awake, dreaming when you dream, and still somehow there even in the deepest sleep, whether you know it or not. Now, you might hear this and think it's metaphysical speculation, ancient philosophy with no grounding in reality. But here's what's strange. The more we learn about consciousness scientifically, the more these old maps start to make a kind of eerie sense. Because what if they weren't talking about belief? What if they were reporting something they observed directly? Through thousands of hours of introspection, meditation, and deliberate exploration of these states, what if the formless awareness they described is the same thing phenomenologists are starting to detect in those fragmentary reports of blank presence? What if science and spirituality are circling the same mystery from different sides, both pointing towards something that exists right at the edge of what can be known? So let's come back to the part that feels most personal, most unsettling. You. Every morning you wake up and assume you're the same person who went to sleep. Same memories, same personality, same sense of continuity stretching back through your life. It feels obvious, unquestionable. Of course you're the same person, but what if you're not? What if the you that wakes up is a reconstruction? A model that gets reassembled each morning from stored patterns, like a computer booting up from saved data. The information is there, your memories, your preferences, your sense of who you are, but the experience of being that person might actually be rebuilt from scratch every single day. Some philosophers take this seriously. They argue that the self isn't a continuous thing that persists through time. It's more like a process, a pattern that the brain maintains moment to moment, and when that pattern breaks down, like it does every night in deep sleep, the self genuinely ceases to exist. What returns in the morning isn't the same self, it's a new iteration, a fresh instantiation of the pattern. You might object, you might say, but I feel continuous. I remember yesterday, I am the same person. And that's true, you do feel that way. But feeling continuous and being continuous aren't the same thing. Your brain is designed to create that feeling, to stitch together the gaps, to maintain the illusion of a stable, enduring I, even when the underlying process is constantly starting and stopping. Think about it. Right now, in this moment, you have no direct access to the person you were in deep sleep last night. That version of you, if it even existed, left no trace, no memory, no record. It's as if it never was, and yet you don't experience that as death. You don't mourn the loss, you just assume you were there the whole time, even though all the evidence suggests otherwise. So maybe the continuity of self is something we tell ourselves, a story the mind constructs to make sense of the fact that we keep waking up with the same memories. But the actual experience, the actual consciousness, that might be far more fragmented, far more impermanent than we're comfortable admitting. And if that's true, if the self is something that dissolves and reforms every single night, then what exactly are we protecting? What are we defending? What is this identity we cling to so tightly when it can't even survive a few hours of sleep? Maybe the question isn't, where do I go when I don't dream? Maybe the question is, was I ever really here to begin with? Here's what all of this points toward, whether you approach it through neuroscience, phenomenology, or ancient wisdom. The void isn't empty, it's foundational. Every night, when the mind goes quiet and the self dissolves, you don't fall into nothingness. You fall into something deeper than thought, deeper than identity, deeper than memory. Something that doesn't need content to exist. Something that's been there all along, underneath every experience you've ever had. Science sees it as the breakdown of integration, the collapse of the networks that generate awareness. And maybe that's true on one level. But what if that breakdown isn't the end of consciousness? What if it's just the end of a particular form of consciousness? The busy, constructed, self-referential kind we're used to? And what remains is simpler, quieter, more fundamental. The meditators who claim to stay aware through deep sleep aren't saying they experience things. They're saying they rest in a kind of knowing that doesn't depend on objects, a presence that's always been here but usually gets drowned out by the noise of thinking and perceiving and identifying. And the ancient traditions map this terrain with incredible precision. They said the deepest state, the one we touch every night without realizing it, is blissful, not because it feels good, but because it's free from division, free from the tension of subject and object, free from the exhausting work of being someone. What if dreamless sleep is a nightly reunion with that, a return to the ground state, not as an experience you can remember, but as a homecoming you can't avoid? And here's the question that opens everything up. If this formless, silent awareness is what you become when everything else falls away, then what does that say about waking life? How much of what you think is essential, your thoughts, your identity, your story, is just noise layered on top of something much simpler? What if the deepest truth of who you are isn't something you need to find or achieve or become? What if it's something you return to every single night without even knowing it? What if you've been meeting yourself in the dark all along? There's a strange comfort in all of this if you let it settle. The idea that every night, without effort, without intention, you dissolve into something that doesn't need you to be anyone. You don't have to maintain your story there. You don't have to defend your identity or remember your past or worry about your future. You just rest in a kind of being that asks nothing of you. And maybe that's the real mystery. Not where you go when you don't dream, but what remains when everything you think of as you is gone. Because something does remain, whether it's the silent hum of minimal awareness, or the formless ground the ancients spoke of, or just the biological continuity that lets you wake up and pick up where you left off. Something persists through the gap. And that something might be closer to your true nature than any thought you've ever had about yourself. If this stirred something in you, if it opened a question you didn't know you were carrying, I'd love to hear what it was. Leave a comment below, even just a word or two. It helps me understand what's landing, and it reminds all of us that we're not alone in wondering about these things. And if you want to keep exploring questions like this, the ones that live quietly beneath the surface of everyday life, subscribe. There's more where this came from. So tonight, when you fall asleep, maybe hold the question lightly, not as something to solve, but as something to feel. What is it that meets the void? What is it that returns? You won't remember the answer, but maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is that you've been touching this mystery every single night of your life, brushing against the deepest part of yourself in a place where memory can't follow. And just maybe, there are other moments in waking life, quiet moments, still moments, moments where the mind goes blank and you forget to be anyone, where that same presence is available, not as something far away, not as something you need to achieve, but as something you've never actually left. And if you're curious about what happens when you do dream, about the strange worlds the mind builds while you sleep, there's another video waiting for you. I'll leave it right here.